Welcome back to another episode of the HIT podcast. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where I bring you real life stories from some of the most interesting and inspirational leaders of our sector. Today, I was delighted to be joined by Elly Hoult, Group Director of Assets and Sustainability at Notting Hill Genesis. We talked about the recent sustainability strategy that Notting Hill have released, and we talk about all things from skill gaps to funding, from partnership to collaboration, from new technology to fuel poverty. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do enjoy it, I hope that you like and subscribe. Elly, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, James.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's Friday, so it's a day when I can knuckle down and get some work done.
Amazing. As I always like to start this, if you could just do us an introduction to yourself, a little bit about yourself and the role you're currently doing, that'd be great.
Yep. My name is Elly Hoult, and I am the Group Director for Assets and Sustainability at Notting Hill Genesis. And I also am a board member on the Chartered Institute of Housing.
Lovely. And just, you've been with NHG 6 years, is it, roughly?
Yes, around 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And just in terms of kind of going back a little bit, I always like to understand how people got into housing. So just go back to that point, kind of, did you fall into housing? Most people seem to, or what was your journey through housing?
Sure. So my first role in housing was as an administrator in a small housing association in Oxford called Chilwell Housing Trust, which no longer exists. And I knew nothing about housing associations. So I'd just gone there. It was an admin job, and I thought, great, this looks like something I can do and fun place to work. And I quickly discovered that they were really amazing businesses. It was quite a small organisation at that time, around 3,000 homes, and it went through a series of mergers to become Dominion and then A2 Dominion, and that was over a sort of 4 or 5 year period. Whilst I was there, I really got interested in the supported housing side of things, and there was a lot of supporting people money around then, so it was a really well funded part of the business. And so I took a role working with vulnerable young people and in a mother and baby unit and young men on probation, and was a supported housing officer, and I loved it. It was like I learned so much about housing, about what housing is about. It was really enjoyable. I did that for about 5 years, and then I was given the opportunity. Well, a role came up and I applied for it to move into a development role. So I worked in a development team for a while within the key worker and intermediate rent section as a sort of project manager. It was like an intermediary between housing and development. And by this time I'd been at A2 Dominion for about 10 years. So I decided I wanted to learn a bit more and do something different. And I'd done a master's in housing during this time as well, so I learned a lot more and felt like I wanted to move on. So I went and took a post at Orbit Group in a business improvement role. I'd been trained in lean whilst I was at A2D, so I missed that bit out. Actually, I had a business improvement role there as well for some time. And I took up a business improvement role at Orbit, which is fantastic, and they weirdly had their own internal consultancy which sold services to other local authorities and housing associations, and I ended up running that and delivering lean to housing associations and all over the country, and Northern Ireland and Wales and you name it. I was driving about 20,000 miles a month at the time, and then I took a business improvement role at Notting Hill Genesis. I was keen to get back into London, and I really enjoyed working in London for a range of reasons. And then I was fortunate enough to be there when we went through the merger. And given my background in change and transformation, it was a natural move for me to lead the merger, which was really exciting and difficult. And then we had a succession plan for executive. So I was part of that process for succession for the executive team. I went through a process. I was successful in getting a sort of deputy group director role. And then COVID happened, and then our group director of assets decided to leave. And so I was asked if I could step up as an interim position to do that. But I have a fantastic team around me, and really, a leadership role is a leadership role to some extent. And then I was successful to be recruited into the permanent position as we got through that COVID period. So yeah, that's it. I mean, it's quite a bit long. Sorry, probably.
No, that's good. That's perfect. I've got a couple of questions on that. I get asked quite a lot actually around how do people put themselves in the right position to get to a senior role like you have done today? Like what would you give as advice or tips as some of the things you've done in your housing career to get you the gravitas and the experience you've needed to be able to take this role on at the moment as a group director?
So I think there are some key things you can do. So yes, like opportunity presenting itself is part of the process. So there's no getting away from that, but you need to be ready to maximize on that opportunity. So I've worked really, really hard to get to this position, and I maintain that like hard work will help you to achieve what you need to do. So for example, the role I took in Notting Hill Genesis, I did a over 5-hour commute every day round trip because I really wanted the job. So that was a sacrifice I was prepared to make and was able to make. I appreciate not everybody can do that to achieve the role. So there's something about kind of just putting the hours in. The other thing is like networking. So I spend a lot of time at events, talking to people, meeting people. I'm quite prolific on social media, but that wasn't really important at the beginning of my career because it didn't really exist. And I think it is helpful to an extent, but I don't think there's a substitute for meeting people and getting out and about. And then the other thing is, I'm sitting on various different groups and things, but the sort of extracurricular stuff around education and different voluntary groups that you can get involved in within your own time. And all of those things combined, I think, give you a breadth and a depth that enable you to be in the right position at the right time to maximize on that opportunity.
Yeah, no, great answer. I think in terms of the other thing that I'm trying to support, and the reason that I do the podcast as well, is that trying to get people to think of housing as their first choice. And obviously we're still not in that spot, right? People aren't coming through university going, necessarily, I'm going to join housing as an organization. But with everything going on around sustainability, with everything going on about the interesting stuff, like I think the next generation of talent are looking for planet roles, things that they can do to involve in the environment, etc. What advice would you give to someone that's like considering housing, and also kind of how can we support the next generation to think of housing as their first choice, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a brilliant sector to work in, and I I'm so fortunate that I sort of found a role in housing. I think it's really varied. So like I can't compare it to anything else, but there's so many different types of roles that people can get involved with. And actually we know from research that Gen Z like to move around, and you can do that quite easily within an organization and without even having to change organizations and still get breadth and depth and interest. There are some really interesting roles emerging in more techie things like IT, technology, the sustainability stuff. Some of that's quite technical. So I think actually the roles are evolving from more generalist to more specialist roles. So that might appeal to different types of graduates or different types of people with skills coming through.
Yeah. And it's not, it's a really good industry for actually not needing to be a graduate necessarily, is it, as well? Like, a lot of other industries are looking for first-class degrees. Lots of leaders I speak to didn't go to university, they didn't do that traditional path, and they've ended up in chief exec roles in all sorts of different paths. So I think it's a good endorsement for our sector. And if we just go on to your sort of current role, then just give us the kind of like day-to-day. So Group Director of Assets and Sustainability, what does that mean from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, so day to day, I might be out on an estate with residents, going to look at perhaps a heat network or a plant room or a lift, or chatting to residents about how they feel about us, how their planned works are going, kitchens and bathrooms. I might be doing some strategic work around thinking about how we're going to achieve our long-term net zero goals. I will be meeting with my team and chatting to them about their progress and how they are developing their operational plans to help to deliver our longer term goals. Probably quite a few budget meetings, because value for money is really important. I've got a big budget and I don't want to spend it badly, even though there's a lot of money. It's actually still quite difficult to make it go round and to make sure it's directed to the right place. So that's probably a sort of typical week for me.
Okay. And I know we want to talk about this, but just in terms of the sustainability part of your role, I've just seen that you've launched your sustainability plans. Give us an overview of that, because I'd be interested to understand kind of where it's come from, what the kind of purpose was, and the vision that you had, I suppose, to put this together. And then we can break it down a little bit into turn of some of the fundamental parts of it.
Sure. I mean, I'm really excited that we've got a new sustainability strategy. It's our first ever sustainability strategy.
Yeah.
And all organisations are going to need to adapt to climate change. It is a pressing issue, a potentially catastrophic issue if we don't act soon. So the ability to ensure that we are helping to adapt to that and keeping our residents warm and dry and comfortable through climate change is really important. So that's the number one thing. There are probably sort of three main parts to it, I guess. So there's the biggest part of it is our homes, as you'd expect. We have around 68,000 homes at Notting Hill Genesis, and we have around 12,000 that we are required to retrofit to energy performance level C by 2030. So that's a sort of an initial medium-term goal, if you like. Beyond that, we have to achieve net carbon zero by 2050, which is a much tougher target, given that we have a whole range of different types of homes and archetypes. So the strategy talks a little bit to starting to map what that might look like and how we might achieve net carbon zero. And then the other key element, which is really important actually, and something I'm quite passionate about, is green spaces. So where our residents live, particularly being in a city, how we create really good green spaces that work for our residents, that are designed by our residents, and that also contribute to a healthy climate.
Amazing. We'll come back to green spaces because I've got a couple of questions around that. But the first thing that I noticed, and from talking to you quite a lot, is that there was a massive like a resident involvement in the strategy, wasn't there? So talk us through that. How did you get them involved? What was the plan, and how much involvement did they have in this final piece of work that I've looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. We do quite a bit of resident engagement in Notting Hill Genesis, but we had an overwhelming response to the sustainability strategy, which says a lot about how our residents feel about the importance of climate change. We had 1,700 residents that responded to an initial survey, and then we did some further workshops with our residents around how we might design the strategy. We it's really important to me that we continue to involve residents through that process. I'm hearing quite a lot about the green agenda and resident behaviour and how we engage with residents to go into their homes to do the works that needed. And personally, I don't like some of the language and rhetoric that's used around it. I don't think it's that difficult. We need to stop othering our residents and thinking them as different. I mean, so my question is, how would I feel about retrofit? So I recently tried to get some solar panels on my home. It's really difficult. I'm in this field. It's really difficult to know where to find. The language is technical. It's very hard to tell whether you're getting value for money. So all of those things combined, people come out to your home. I've got the ability to choose who comes into my home. If a contractor comes in and he's a bit creepy, I think, well, I'm not going to, and he quotes, so I'm not going to have him to come back and do the work. Our residents don't always have those choices, and I'm really, really keen that through this retrofit program that we put them at the centre of the decision making, and so that they have an opportunity to decide how it works for them. and then I don't think it's an issue. So a survey should be quick. Somebody comes in, non-intrusive, they get it done. Then the information should be shared really quickly with the resident about what's going to happen, and then it's just about communication.
Of course. And yeah, the biggest barrier as well is communication. And what I liked about the strategy is it speaks to different audiences. I think we need to stop making the language so complicated around the green agenda, because it confuses us just by the language we use. I think it's quite a simple process, but I do agree with you that this retrofitting is going to be intrusive for residents. And I think, how are you going to minimize that? I know you say through communication, but naturally there's going to be some intrusion in us having to go into people's homes and retrofit these properties.
Yeah, I mean, we've done some research, and many of our homes won't require deep retrofit. They might require like things that can be done as part of our normal planned program. So where we're perhaps replacing windows, we can put the additional measures in at the same time. So we're going to try and minimize disruption through our planned program as much as possible. There will be homes where we will be required to do much more work, and we'll need to think very carefully about how we manage that process, whether we offer for our residents to move out during the process, whether we perhaps move them into one of our renew voids, which is an offer that I'm putting together around levelling up our homes so that they're of a really high quality standard. So I think we can't get away from the fact that some homes are going to require quite a lot of intrusive work to help them to achieve our goals. But I think as long as we plan it effectively and we work with residents and work with them to get to where we need to be, then it shouldn't be an issue.
No. And what do you think about, if you look at the 12,000 homes, some will be, like you say, minor, but what's going to be the main tactic, do you think, for us to retrofit homes across the housing sector? Is it going to be windows? Is it going to be heat pumps? What's going to be the actual technology or the main thing that we replace or change to try and get that EPC banding up?
Yes, it's really going to vary, and housing associations will vary on this. And we have I think it's about 15% of our homes are Victorian street properties, whereas some housing associations have like more modern estates, and they require very different approaches. We are adopting, a fabric first approach, which means making the building as airtight as it can be, and a lot of that can be done through planned works. We've demonstrated that already through some pilots, so I think that's important. In terms of the energy source, which I think is stage 2, so we can probably get most of our homes to EPCC through fabric measures,
right?
But the in terms of energy source and air source heat pumps, this is still quite a new technology, and I've been looked at various different versions now, and I know that the government is keen that this is the way forward. And absolutely, we need to find, now more than ever, we need to find different sources of energy. But I do think there is quite a long way to go for an air source heat pump to provide the warmth and comfort that we're used to from gas. It just doesn't work in the same way. But it might be the solution for some homes, but not for every home.
Okay. And in terms of because one thing I worry about, and mainly because I'm a recruiter, right, is that the amount of sustainability roles I'm seeing at head of and the director level is crazy. But we're going to have to do something around the skills gap that we currently have around some of these A technologies, B some of the stuff that, even tradesmen to do planned works is becoming a bigger and bigger problem every week. What can we do to address some of these skill gaps in the industry that we currently work in, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that concerns me is that what I'm calling the tsunami that's approaching, which is when the first SHDF funding is announced. And so everybody will be going to the market at the same time in what is already quite a difficult market in terms of technical expertise. It's not going to be solved overnight, but I do think that we have a responsibility to grow some of our own talent. So we have started an apprenticeship program within Assets. We brought in 4 young BME graduates. They're just coming to the end of that, and we're definitely going to expand that program. And they are brilliant, and the skills that they're bringing through. And sustainability is a learning journey for all of us. So it's iterative. So it's the best time now to grow the talent ourselves at the beginning. I know that some of our contractors are looking to do that as well, but we have a responsibility, I think, ourselves to grow some of that talent.
Yeah. And what about where do you stand on reskilling in terms of there's going to be less gas, as we know?
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do around some of our current crop of talent that might not have the skills that they need in the future about, retraining, reskilling, whatever you want to call it? But actually, do you think that's a strand of strategy we should look at?
I mean, I think most gas companies now are retraining they've got the foresight to understand that gas isn't going to be the way forward, and they're retraining their workforce. One of the biggest issues, however, is that the average age of a gas engineer is, I think, it's over 55. So it's an aging population anyway. So there needs to be something done to create exciting roles for younger people coming through. And I think that the way that can be achieved is to move away from the idea that we have traditional sort of single type roles where you're a gas engineer and you do boilers, and have more diversity. Young people want more things to do because they're omni-channel, and that's how their brains work. That's how they've grown up. That's how education's been for them. So the idea that they're just going to get one role and just go and do boilers, I think, is potentially a little bit old-fashioned and restrictive, and perhaps that's why we're not seeing the talent come through, because we haven't created more of a package around it.
No, I agree. I did a talk at a college recently, and it was harrowing, I would say, to see how little people were going through trades apprenticeships.
Really?
And it's a big problem for the future, I think.
Really?
But we'll see how we fix it. Yeah. And you mentioned about funding. Like, I'm not massively understanding of the funding, but talk me through like what funding there will be available, because I don't kind of understand it massively.
So there's some funding available to improve heat networks, which is already out there. And this is to optimize localized heat networks so that they're able to, I think the sort of long-term vision is that energy will be provided at a local level rather than sort of in a national way. That's quite far off. So there's some funding around that. The other area of funding is the Social Housing Decarbonization Fund. So the wave that's about to come out is £800 million, and that's to take homes from an E, F and G to a C level. And that will be over a 3-year period. So there'll be quite a lot of learning in that. And then I guess it remains to be seen if more funding comes beyond that. I would hope it would, but given the current economic situation we're in at the moment, it may be an area that is considered an easy place to cut for the government. So we'll have to see. But that does feel quite short-sighted if that is the way forwards.
Yeah, I was around when they did Green Deal, and I don't know if you remember back wherever it was, 8-10 years ago, and it got cut really quick. And I do worry that they might try and do that again. I think it'd be really short-sighted, but I think we're too far into the global agenda of sustainability, aren't we? Really, for them to change their mind on it now.
Not sure. They are turning on coal plants this winter to prop up lack of energy. So it's not an easy. There's no easy solution to this, because we're sort of beholden by the infrastructure that we've got, and these things can't be resolved overnight. But it has to be funded properly, and there has to be a national joined up policy for us to get to where we need to be. Otherwise, we're just going to be constantly reacting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for your team specifically, just on the skills and funding piece, how much are you going to have to upskill your current team, and how many people are you likely to have to recruit to be able to deliver your current sustainability strategy? Because naturally, you won't have all of those skills in-house.
Yeah, so we've trained some of our team already to pass 2035, which is the standard for retrofit, and partially that's so that they understand the right questions to ask of our contractors as well, because much of this work will have to sit beyond our organisation, but we do need some of the skills in-house to be able to manage the contracts and to ask the right questions. I'm personally undertaking a MSc at UCL in sustainability in health and buildings, because I think it's really the future of, maybe talk a bit about that later, but the future of housing will be thinking around health. So I think I'm starting to think about how we bring technical expertise in at each tier. It's difficult to say at this point what we'll need beyond the skills that we've got until we find out potentially about our social housing decarbonisation funding, because that will inform our programme and how much work we bring forward. But we are going to need some project managers, and we are bringing our apprentices through. They're just finishing now into those posts, and they will also be trained. So it's very much about, and again, it's a bit iterative at the moment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one thing I always think about you when I see LinkedIn and other people that know you, I mean, you're on the podcast because someone recommended you, so clearly you've got a good network. But how important is the future?
I thought you liked me, James. I thought that's
No, I do. But the key thing that I always get from you is like partnership and collaboration is really important. But how much more and how much can we be doing to learn from colleagues across the sector rather than just individual businesses going off and doing their thing, doing their sustainability strategy? And sometimes, being honest, recreating the wheel. How can we collaborate better, do you think, in the future?
Yeah, the age-old question. I think I've been asked this for about 20 years. No, but I think the sustainability agenda is the perfect place for us to collaborate. But actually, I'm beginning to sort of come around to the idea that collaboration beyond our sector is where we're going to get the biggest gains. I think we can do much more with the private sector, and I think we can do much more with other types of industry like tech. We've done some really interesting things with startups, and a lot of this stuff is going to be technology as we go forwards. So for me, it'd be great if we could come together as housing associations and do procurements together and things like that, but it's quite difficult to do because of the governance and regulation and things that sit around it. But I think being able to collaborate beyond our own boundaries as a sector is where we'll get some good value for money gains and some step change.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the partnership piece for me is working with contractors that are already delivering our planned works to say, let's upskill our teams together. Because to be honest, like we need the contractors to upskill at the same rate as we're upskilling, don't we, as a sector, really?
We do. And, it's very difficult at the moment because there's so much work for us. The market forces are sort of against us, really. There's so much building safety work to be done. There's people are up in their planned programs, so it's not like there's a plethora of people hanging around waiting to take on more retrofit work. So I think I think it does need some policy and some further thought strategically, as well as kind of us collaborating beyond our own organisation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you just mentioned technology there. What kind of new technologies do you think will come through? And my biggest worry is we train people on today's technology. It's like teaching my mum how to use an iPhone, worrying that next year there's going to be another technology I need to teach her. But how do we evolve with technology? Because are you seeing anything around technology that you think is going to be fundamental to our growth and sustainability, or do you think we're still evolving the technologies?
I think the technology market probably could do more, but as you described it, the market isn't ready, and that's one of the issues that we have. There's some fantastic products out there. So if I'm thinking sort of medium to long term, I think in the future that homes will manage their energy sources from a centralized platform, combining heat and electrical consumption and ventilation. There'll be local energy plants, as I've described it. I think smart homes will be much more advanced, so they'll remind us things like to turn water off, to turn water down because it's too hot, all of those things. One of the things that's really interesting is, so my husband's in the Air Force, and the aerospace industry was telling me the other day is developing self-healing composites. So this is a way to heal cracks in the fuselage of aircraft. So it basically is combining biology and physics essentially together. So if there's a crack, a catalyst occurs. They introduce something and a catalyst occurs and it self-heals. And I think that the future, I know it's bonkers,
I know that is bonkers.
But this stuff's happening now. So you can see the sort of future of housing will have sort of self-repairing homes. It feels very sci-fi, but I do believe that they'll become much more almost self-sufficient as a home when less reliant on sort of old-fashioned large-scale infrastructure.
Yeah, I had someone on the podcast the other day, and from Ilka Homes Modular Housing, and they were talking about this zero bills concept. Now, granted, to get that to an efficient price point is going to be the challenge, right? But just the fact we're even talking about a house could self-fund itself is crazy. So I think we are moving forward. It's just a slow progress.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the technology's there. I think it's about getting the right people in the right room to collaborate and then scaling it. It's always these things, is scaling it is the issue, but it's quite exciting. You know, I find this whole area like fascinating and really exciting, and I'm really privileged to be in the role that I'm in and be able to take this agenda forwards.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like you say, the scale is where the pricing becomes a problem. Once we get to a scale and once the skills gap's fixed, the price will drop and drop and drop and drop. At the moment, everything's quite expensive. And I think that's not going to change for a period, especially solar panels, like you said, they're so expensive now. It almost doesn't make it worth doing. But as we're just talking on sort of residents, and I know it's a massive part of your agenda, what do you think on, and I don't want to touch on it for a long time, but just fuel poverty, cost of living crisis, and how can we support our residents more to try and tackle some of these things? And I know we're doing it through your sustainability strategy, but what else can we do, and what can we do within that to try and make them more comfortable? Because if I'm sat in one of your properties at the moment, I'm thinking, I'm quite scared actually what this means for me in the future.
Yeah, I think I can't remember the stat, but CIH shared some research recently, which it was something terrifying. Like 80% of people are worried about how they're going to pay their bills, and I mean, I think obviously improving the fabric of the home and all of that stuff will help, but that is a long-term thing. That is not going to help with the acute problem that we find ourselves in now. Ultimately, we can we've got a welfare benefits advice team. We can help with benefits advice, and we can help signpost people. We've got a hardship fund so people can access things. We're very flexible and caring and compassionate when it comes to people's individual circumstances, and we'll do everything we can. But ultimately, the acute challenge really is it really has to come from the government if people are, because for the first time ever, we're not just going to have our general needs residents potentially on the breadline. I'm generalizing here, but that is where we sit. We're also going to find that our shared ownership residents are in a similar position. So none of us are immune. It's our staff. Many of them are worried about how they're going to pay their bills, and so this is the acute problem. I think is really has to come from the government, the solution for the here and now. But we'll obviously do everything we can to support our residents through this what will be a difficult winter.
Yeah, and you're so correct. And yeah, I think what we're seeing is the inflationary prices of what people are asking for certain roles now has gone up as well, crazily. Because if I'm going to move jobs, well, I'm going to need to factor in what might be potentially a massive cost of living crisis. It is honestly just having such an impact in every walk of life at the moment. Just something you touched on at the beginning, which I was really fascinated about, especially because of the London dynamic, is this green space thing. I'm up in the northwest. We've got loads of green space, so it doesn't seem like that's a problem. But talk to me about the challenge that you face as a London-centric housing association.
Yeah, well, I sit on a green spaces advisory board, and there's a few of us that are trying to sort of work out how we best deliver or manage or maximise our green spaces. I mean, I think we've got lots of green space. So we've got lots of green spaces on our estates, and and it's lovely and planted and things like that. But it hasn't been designed at the outset with how it will be used in mind. Not all of it, perhaps some of our more recent new build stuff has, but B, how it can contribute to improving climate change.
Yeah, fun.
So for example, we have contractors that go out and cut grass every week. Fantastic, it's lovely and short, but that doesn't do anything to help the bees or the butterflies and that sort of thing. So there's a piece around really working with the residents to understand how can we make this a really nice space and a space that you want to use. So maybe allotments or a nature garden or whatever the residents feel like they want, but also how can we make it so that it's a positive contribution to addressing climate change. And I'm only really sort of we're just sort of getting into this on this Green Spaces Advisory Board, but it's actually quite a complex area because different people want to use the space for different things.
Yeah, of course.
So it's about really sort of trying to work out what's the best for the majority of people, and that has to be led by our residents.
Yeah, amazing. I'm really excited to see how that looks. And to be honest, I think we should get you back on in a few years and see how you've got on with some of this sustainability stuff. I know it's quite a new strategy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, keep you accountable. It's always good. Couple of other things that I just wanted to touch on. The first one, and something I'm really passionate about in the sector, is around diversity. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. Being a female leader in our sector, and obviously there's lots of protected characteristics, and we're trying to tackle all those things in our recruitment processes. However, what's your view and what's your journey been like from a diversity point of view in the housing sector, and how has it changed and evolved?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been passionate about ED&I since I was a teenager. It's something I really care about, that everybody should feel included, and evidence shown, although I've suspected this all along, I didn't need the evidence that diverse groups produce much better results and outcomes. I mean, I had some really terrible experiences in the early part of my career. They just wouldn't happen now. Like sexism was tolerated, in some instances encouraged. But I still see examples of sexism happening now. So phrases like baby brain when people are pregnant, or how many times I get referred to as a career woman, and I won't even start on the have I got children thing and all the horrible questions that usually follow that. It's definitely less and less, and I can't say that we're a sexist sector, because I don't see that like day to day. Like I don't see that. But you've only got to look at the leadership roles to know that we don't have diverse teams, and that's across all characteristics. It's predominantly still extremely white. It's probably much better on females now than it was when I started, but it's still not where it needs to be. So I mean, I've got more relaxed about the sexism thing as I've got older. If I see it, I call it out and move on. But I'm, really get quite frustrated and angry on behalf of some of my Black colleagues, and some of these. We recently did quite a bit of work in Notting Hill Genesis on our race agenda, and some of the experiences they've had. Are just shocking, and actually still continue to have, hopefully not within Notting Hill Genesis now, but just within the wider society and their own experiences. So yeah, we've come some way, but we've got an awful long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. And just you even saying I've relaxed on the sexism thing just upsets me as a narrative in itself, in terms of.
Well, I suppose I'm just saying I'm not kind of you kind of get to a point where it's a lot better than it was, and maybe that's me just, I don't know, maybe you just kind of get damped down by it a little bit, but I will still always call it out, and I will still campaign for women, and I lead a women's group at work, and I openly talk about ED&I, but yeah, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we do things. So BME, if we just look at Black talent in the sector, right? Black Lives Matter happens, and I'm really going to probably get on my soapbox a little bit here, but all of a sudden everyone sparks into action. We get all these strategies together, and everyone's rah, let's get this fixed. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we've done some stuff. So, and the messaging and the narrative gets lost, and we start thinking about other things that become.
Well, the FTSE 100 actually regressed it's regressed since all of their aspirations and promises, and it's got worse since the Black Lives Matter movement. So, it just feels like you take one step forward, two steps back, and maybe I'm getting a bit worn down by it now, which is a bit of a shame. But I will always continue to campaign for ED&I, always.
Yeah, there's too much. Without getting too deep into it, there's too much tokenism. The amount of times that we've not taken on a brief because someone said, can we just have one female on this? Can we have? It's not how it should be. It shouldn't be that way. But we're still in that. Unfortunately, we're still in that world. And I think most organisations have got better, but there's still people still in the olden days, and we need to change that and keep talking about it. And if we keep talking about it, it'll keep in focal points for people, I think. But
yeah, I agree.
And what about, because you just mentioned it then, and I'm interested to understand, I speak to so many female leaders that want to go and progress to the next level of their career. And they say, nah, I just don't put myself forward anymore. How can we encourage people to have the confidence, especially female talent that I speak to, and that's, evidenced across hundreds and hundreds of candidates. And they say, do you know what? I'm just going to stay where I am. I think I'm at the right level. I don't want to push myself to the next level because I don't have the confidence I can do all those things on a job description. Whereas a man would look at that and go, oh, yeah, well, I don't know how to do them, but I'll try and do them. How can we create that safe space so that someone feels comfortable to put themselves forward into those roles?
I think there are two practical ways that can be done. The first is exactly what we did at Notting Hill Genesis, which is the succession planning, which is giving people an opportunity to say where they think they need to develop, and then putting them into a deputy role to experience that with the protection of a really well experienced executive team that can bring and develop that person on. So I think there's something around sort of deliberately creating space for people to grow and develop. The second thing, which I think is really important, and I think men have as much, if not more, of a role to play in this than women, is the point around sponsorship and sponsoring people through. The thing I really hate about women's going into leadership positions, women's programs are always about how women can bring women on and how women leaders can bring women on, and how women need to help women. And actually the people that need to be bringing the women on are the men, because they're in the positions. So I think a really strong sponsorship program from male leaders to bring women through and women is where we'll get the change.
No, I agree. No, I do agree. And as we come to kind of a close, a couple of things that I wanted to ask you, and I always ask guests this, but what do you see the future of housing to look like, and what are you expecting to happen next 3-5 years? What do you see?
I mean, it's really difficult to predict with headwinds that we're experiencing at the moment. I think if you look at the next 2 years, it's going to be very difficult especially if we are faced with a rent cap from a financial perspective to deliver some of our aspirations. I would hope we can continue to do the things that we want to do around improving our existing homes, improving the experience for residents, and really focusing on those people that live in our homes is our first priority. And that may have to be at the expense of development, and I'm sure it will be for a lot of organisations, which is a shame because we want to also provide lots of new housing for those people that need it. But so I think, the next 3 to 5 years will be sort of buckling down and really improving that trust with our relationship with our residents, and that's got to be our focus. It has to be.
No, I totally agree. And if you was in a bit of an ironic question at the moment, but if you were in government at the moment and you were Liz Truss, what would you implement to make our sector better? What would be some of the things that you would do to try and change the direction of travel for housing as a sector?
I definitely wouldn't want to be in government at the moment, because despite who's in charge, I think it's a really difficult role at this current point in time. I mean, if I go back to, because the sustainability thing, there's lots of things I could say that colleagues would say around like the economy and finances and homeless people, but actually where I think we can make a really big difference to lots of things is this becoming a world leader in renewable energy. So that would provide a jobs market. It will provide a long-term security around our energy provision. We should really look to invest in that heavily, I think, and that will allow us to flourish and thrive in the long term. It's a very difficult decision to make at the moment, given the current situation. But if we keep having these short-termism views, we're just always going to be in the same situation that we're in.
Totally agree, and we are quite a reactive industry, aren't we? But this is a tough 2 years coming up. Building safety, development, build more homes, sustainability, EPC. I mean, it is really all come at once, hasn't it?
Yeah, like there's deep pockets, and then there's like there's like the magic money tree. So
yeah, exactly. And final thing, I mean, you personally, kind of what's next? What are you excited about? What do you want to still achieve in your career, and what are you excited about in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'm most excited about, actually, beyond delivering the sustainability strategy, is this work I'm doing around our long-term asset management strategy, which will level up our homes. I fundamentally believe that all residents deserve a home to a new build standard, like a high quality standard, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to launch something next year that fits that brief. So I'm that's like the sort of a work thing. I mean, who knows? Like, I've never really had a plan. I've kind of just gone. I've been fortunate enough to go where my interest takes me. But definitely the green space stuff, given that doing my degree as well, that just feels like a nice fit for me at the moment, and something I really care about. So nothing better than doing something you love and
of course,
and having it as your job. So
yeah. Well, as we round up, just want to say, like, honestly, we need to get you on the camera more in the housing sector for sustainability, because the way you talk about it is just so passionate and eloquent. But I think I've loved having you on, and like I said, would love to get you back on in 3 or 4 years and just see where we've got to in terms of the sustainability stuff. But as people always like to do, if people do want to reach out or give any feedback, I'll obviously put your LinkedIn handle in the. Are they okay to do so, and just to ask you anything about this strategy and stuff?
Absolutely. LinkedIn's definitely the best place to kind of get hold of me, and I'm really responsive on there, and I'm always happy to talk and answer questions or share things, whatever. So yeah, sounds really good.
Amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, James.
Take
Thank you
care.
very
See you
much.
later.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.